let's get started. All right, so just to give you all a great welcome, my name is Gugulethu Ncube, and I'm the Director of Search and Discovery here at Delivery Hero. I lead a team which is focused on personalization topics, and I'm really happy to have such a great panel with me here to discuss personalization and to learn a bit more from what also other companies are doing and from our very distinguished panel. So I will ask also the panelists to maybe give a quick intro about themselves. So we have Mikio and Humberto and Aleksandra. Maybe you will introduce yourselves.
Yeah, hey, my name is Mikio. I'm recently started consulting companies on putting machine learning to production. And previously I was a staff data scientist at Get Your Guide, and then before that I was quite a long time at Zalando as a engineering manager and principal data scientist.
Thank you, Mikio. Welcome. Humberto.
Hey, my name is Humberto, and I'm currently a product manager in machine learning in the machine learning platform at Booking.com. And I'm also the general co-chair of Rexis, so the Recommender Systems Conference for next year in Amsterdam.
Aleksandra, maybe you say a couple of words.
Hi all, I'm Aleksandra. I work as a senior data scientist at the recommendations and ranking team at Delivery Hero.
All right. So all of us, I suppose, have different interactions with recommender systems and get this more so while we are all working mostly at home. I'll be very curious at some of the items that maybe you have recently bought, which were recommended to you. Can maybe Humberto, do you have anything interesting you can share of something that you discovered through recommendations?
I'd say, well, the first of all is I'm on holidays now, and I guess the hotel that I selected was recommended to me by Booking. And another thing that I thought was really good was that I got a recommendation for a concert by email from a company called Songkick. They do concert recommendations. And it's a concert for Jamie Cullum in May, and I didn't know it was happening, so I got really excited. Both the idea of going to a concert right now seems a bit far-fetched, and also because I really like to go and see Jamie Cullum. So fingers crossed I can go.
Nice. Aleksandra.
Yeah, I was filling the advent calendar for my kids with a lot of small toys and books and the sweets and so on. But I got really nice recommendation for stickers, but not a normal one, but reflective one for the helmets for the kids. And I immediately bought it. I found it really useful recommendation.
Interesting. Mikio?
Yeah, I think, have I bought something of recommend? I don't know, but so I recently started using Spotify. So I'm sort of exploring a lot of new music now through a recommendation system.
What we all have, I think, good experiences is definitely all these interesting items that typically you would in the past search for, but if you have no idea what to search, and so this gives a lot of inspiration. I will be quite curious also which items tend to be popular or are recommended a lot. I guess this might differ by industry and by maybe what algorithms you use. Are there some experiences of which products tend to be recommended a lot and their popularity? Maybe starting with Aleksandra. Can you share some learnings there?
We at Delivery Hero, we work with the food marketplace and delivering delicious dishes. But what we know also for food, like the most common ordered dishes are like pizzas and burgers and chicken dishes. We see this for everywhere. But what is interesting and what we discovered is that it also depends on the location. For example, in Asia, like bubble tea is sold as crazy, also like noodles and sushi. So it also comes from the region where your business is located. Yeah.
And Mikio, do you have any, from your past experience, especially as a consultant? I'm sure you have experienced different product popularity depending on the industry. What can you share there from your learnings?
Yeah, I think so. At Zalando, for example, I'd say that the recommendation, right, it's right on the article page, or like typically in e-commerce, Get Your Guide is very similar. So it's not sure whether you can really. So it's really part of the whole user experience and workflow, right? So you search for something, and then you get to the page, and then you see some recommendation, and you go from there. And it's really so it's not like I would say there's a special kind of thing that often gets recommended, but it's just everything. So potentially everything is part of that, right? So at Zalando, for example, I think it's like if you're looking for a special kind of shoe, and then you start searching, but then you get all kinds of shoes. But then once you click on one of them, right, then you see like very similar ones, and then that's like a great way to continue from your search. So yeah, I think that's one of the main use cases.
Okay. Humberto?
Yeah, I guess there's a few things that I discovered this year as I joined Booking.com, especially in COVID time. So the first one is that I thought was quite interesting is local recommendations. So where to go within a country, we call them destination recommendations. And we heavily push them to be within your country because, as you know, a lot of countries in the world were closed, so that was quite interesting. And I thought also kids-friendly vacation sites are really interesting. So, if you're a family, that really helps you make a decision and so on. Going back to Zalando, the most interesting thing I found was the complementary items recommendation. So imagine if you have like a really beautiful floral shirt. It's really hard to combine unless it's like the perfect floral trousers match. And there's a lot of that going on. But you can only find them through the recommendations, and making sure they are there, it's really cool. And you see people buying those really cool patterns that go very well together. At least that's what excited me the most. Maybe not the most purchased things, but definitely the most valued recommendation things that I saw. Yeah. But now I'm also curious about bubble tea and how often it gets recommended. I wish I had one here now.
Recommendations get spoken about a lot, I guess. Amazon also popularized recommendations. It's always interesting to learn how successful they actually are. With my previous experience in a video sharing platform called My Video in Germany, the discovery of new content was primarily through recommendations. So you would see videos of things you had not seen before, and that will, and then you would see more videos. So basically you have recommendations pretty much driving the whole site. In your current experience, Humberto, how successful are recommendations? Like, are they really drivers now of the business, or are they still, fringe products that just an add-on?
I guess, right. At least in Zalando, they were a big part of the whole user experience, as Mikio said before, right? And I think it's about what do you think is successful when it comes to recommendations, right? Because, and also as you mentioned, Gugu, like even if it's everywhere, just by default, everything you order or you watch might be recommended, and they might still not be great recommendations, right? So I think here is a lot about, well, out of the things that people view or click, how many of them are bought. In the case of, retail or fashion, is about how many of them are actually returned, and what are the things that people would have watched or would have bought anyway if it wasn't recommended. So what's the novelty factor for the recommendations, right? So I don't have specific numbers that I can share, obviously. But I would say for all platforms that I worked with in the past, recommendations have been a big driver for the user experience, right? It's almost like people don't even realize how much they use them, right?
What's your take on that, Mikio?
Yes. No, I think it's a yeah, as Humberto said, it's an integral part, right? So the site wouldn't work without that. But I think what's interesting is often if you look at the actual numbers, right? So they might not actually be as high as you think. So especially if you have like an e-commerce context, it's just one of the many things you can do like on a page, right? So people search for something, they get to the page, maybe they go back, play around with filters, but so recommendation is only one of them. And then, so the actual numbers might be as low as, I don't know, 10% click on the recommendation itself, right? Which doesn't know it's bad. It's just, so you have to see like what the context is. But then like on a checkout page, you often have recommendations or like cross-sell, that kind of stuff. And then it's always quite different. And I think the difference is, or I think what's very interesting is, so on the one side you have sort of recommendation as a machine learning problem, right? And there you're just optimizing for whatever, and you think you have something that really works. But then if you look at like actually in the context of the product, it might look quite differently. Yeah, but still, so this 10% might still be really good.
Nice. Now, food industry, how is that working, Aleksandra?
Yeah, I think the food industry, people like the shortcut that we offer. Like we saw that having this recommendation with lists of recommended restaurants that we call swim lanes, it's a really good approach. And like our home screen now is full of swim lanes, different swim lanes that we offer to our customers, and we have a large percent of orders coming through there. And also when we moved not only from recommendations of restaurants, like when we go to quick commerce, to groceries, we also immediately saw the necessity of providing recommendations there. And as everyone's mentioned, like it's not only okay on the front page where you provide your recommendations, but also adding to the cart, and it has a big impact on the overall orders.
I guess with recommendations, I mean, it's an interesting problem by industry, as I guess all of you have rightfully mentioned. What's interesting is how do you address the fact that if customers get a recommendation and it's pretty off, then of course you can have disappointment from the customers. My recollection of passionate users in video sharing platform was that they sometimes even feel insulted that they are being suggested certain content they are against completely. Granted, my learnings at the time was that controversial videos tend to drive engagement, so it's very hard to do it right. So if you want to drive engagement, then you would probably have the controversial ones. If you want to drive things that are monotonous, but the customers will never share and talk to anyone, then you probably recommend more of the same. But I think back in the days, it was mostly the algorithms tended to actually drive the more interesting ones, things that get shared a lot by customers and so on. So I'm curious, how do you get customers engaged, interested in recommendations, that they are not upset and leave the platform or blame the platform for all kinds of things? How do you make it work? Humberto, what's your experience there?
I think there's different answers, right? Like the first one is that I strongly believe algorithms shouldn't be led, and I coined a phrase from a colleague, led in the wild. So you need to somehow put cages. One of the designers I work with said that, and that means business rules, like some sort of safeguards to ensure that when the distribution of your data change heavily or something bad happens because one of your data sources drop and your recommendations are a bit off, you both get alerted, but also the experience is not really bad. And I think more from the user perspective on our product side, I really like this framework or idea that Paul Amir, who's a researcher on music recommendations, brought a few years back, and it was called WTF evaluation. So what is the cause of getting things wrong, right? And you evaluate your system based on how many things are off instead of how many things I get right. it has huge cost when you imagine if you book a hotel that you thought it was beautiful and you will be really happy, and then all of a sudden it's like really bad, and you spend a lot of money on it. That's a very different cost than, you know, having to skip a song. And I guess in terms of fashion, it's somewhere in between. Like no one likes to return an item because it was the wrong size, or because the color wasn't like what you wanted, right? So we need to make sure that we both optimize for engagement and the ultimate action that you want. And that action is, you know, either a transaction or a transaction that is kept, and so on, right? So in the machine learning part, I think also like multi-objective optimization really helps here. Definitely optimizing for clicks won't get you far on the long run, right? Like, because what you said, you might be pushing things that are just odd, and people like to, and I've seen this a lot, like people just like to click on things that look funny, but they might not be interested in wearing them or going to that place just because it looks funny, right? Yeah, I don't know what are your experiences. I'd love to know more about this, actually.
It's interesting, yeah, that at Delivery Hero we have completely different marketplace. Like the signal from the customers is also very low. Like they order a dish like once a week or once a day, it will be superb. And it's also, even if you find the best vendor to recommend, you don't know if this vendor is available for this customer at a given location at a given time. So it's really a challenging task. And as you said, it's even worse because the customer cannot return the dish. So the dish has to be right perfect for this for consuming in the, I don't know, half hour of the delivery or so. And it's a really challenging task. And yeah, we are also trying to also optimize on for which will be the best vendors for this customer, but also like available for delivery, and also ideally have the fastest delivery, right, for this customer. And we always do, when we like modify the algorithm or the method, we always do experiments and like this A/B testing and see, okay, is this making our customers to drop or no, and quickly close the experiment, shut down the experiment, and have the good algorithm running so that our customers don't churn. So yeah.
And could you, because this is super interesting,
yeah.
You said you do A/B testing, but is there a way to mimic that offline before you go live? I guess things like
yes.
How long will it take are really hard to
yes,
look at.
yeah. I mean, we try offline evaluation also, and we see there is some correlation between the offline and online evaluation. We usually use our offline evaluation also to sort of do hyperparameter tuning. So before, picking up some specific values for the parameters and so on. And this is very helpful. But we also try to have the online, if we believe in some method that it should perform good online, we try to give it a chance.
Mikio, what's been your experience there?
Yes, there's a lot of interesting things here. I think so. I mean, one is the general difficulty, or like the challenge that for the algorithm, they have no context, right? So they just see clicks, and as Humberto said, so sometimes there's an item that gets clicks a lot because just it's funny, but it's not really relevant. So it has like a huge novelty factor or something. And the question is, so how do you catch these things, right? So do you try to make your metric more robust against these things, or do you start introducing like manual testing before you deploy? But then there's only so much you can test manually and so on. So I think that's really the sort of the challenge of making the connection between the machine learning and the product side, right? So how do you properly formulate what it is that you want to optimize? Also, because as what you said about videos, right? So there's a lot of like controversy about YouTube because I think whether it's really true, but so they say they want to engage, they optimize for customer engagement, and then the algorithm just sort of picks whatever works, like based on the data, but then that means it's sort of the more disturbing stuff that gets people engaged. And then the question is this really what you want, right? And then that's the part that you need to manage. Yeah. And then I think the other thing is, so even if the metric is right, so getting away from like a very good baseline for recommendation is often just to show like recent items, right? Because they usually have a high relevance, and then people say, "Ah, yeah, let me look at that again." So even if you have everything right, getting to something that's really sort of personalized and relevant for what the customer is looking at right now, I think that's also a big challenge.
I'm gonna say +1 to that recent items, because I've seen that work
Yes.
wonders. Like, you spend months and years working on machine learning, and then this thing works really well, right? Because that's what people are looking for. Yeah.
A lot of platforms also have partnerships, and also in some cases different markets exist around the world, right? I think Delivery Hero also is in so many different markets, be it in South America, Latin America, Middle East, Asia, and Europe, and so on. I'm curious also if there is any form of localization that is done on the algorithms. Does it make sense? Are they universal? Does it apply for everything? And more so, if there are partnerships, how does one actually handle them? So I don't know if there's any experience there. Aleksandra, maybe you can share how this is done in Delivery Hero.
Yeah, so there are two parts of the question. First, for example, like partnerships or brands that we have around the globe. What we usually do, we get requests from one brand and for a specific type of recommendations, and we always tend to build our recommendations as generalized as possible, for example, so that we are able to easily plug in these recommendations to another brand, for another location, for example. But sometimes we also experience that is necessary to adjust based on the market, based on the location. Like a very, very simple example would be even the density of the vendors that are delivering, like the restaurants that are delivering to a specific location. And we always leave some space to be able to adjust these parameters based on the location or based on the brand. And then the other component is that, for example, in each of these brands, you have three players, right? You have the customers, the restaurants, and the riders. And then we also try not to, like, of course, our main goal is to optimize on the customer experience. But then you would like also to give a chance that all of the restaurants are shown, not only like the top most popular restaurants are always getting all of the orders. We would like to give space for the new restaurants that are offering delivery, and you also like to optimize on the riders so that they need to have also good experience and not to be necessary to drive long stretches to deliver food. So it's a multi-objective optimization again.
Mikio, what do you think?
I mean, so I think there are two things, right? So one is how do you want to have like separate models for different areas or stuff, and then I think technically you can either actually have separate models and train them on different parts of the like the customer base and so on, or you can try to have like one model for everything, but then encode the local areas into the into your data, and then hope that the model is flexible enough to pick that up, right? And then so there are some, if you can make that work, I think it's more robust, because then the model could potentially also use data, so combine data which otherwise you would have separated, like on a strong basis. Yeah, I think a completely different topic is a bit like, okay, what in general, what do you do if you have customers or brands and they have like different ideas, like what should be shown and what should be ordered and stuff like that. And so I can't really like talk about what the companies I worked at do, but I think the interesting idea, so Jeff Bezos from Amazon, I think that he famously said, right, so I mean, in relation to customers and stakeholders, you should always just think about the customers. So because then if you get more customers, then the stakeholders will also be happy. And I think it's like a similar thing. So the most important thing is, I think, that you show something that's relevant to the customer, because then more people will come to your platform, and then the sort of whatever brand or other partners are also happy. And I think it's really hard to, but I mean, if you want to try to sort of get that together, combine these things, that can be really hard to make it work so that it still makes sense for the customer in the end. Yeah.
Humberto,
I mean, I think both answers are great, right? Like there's a lot of info here to unpack. What I would like to add is following up on Mikio's thought. It is actually really hard to solve this problem of, you know, giving, and the one that Aleksandra mentioned, how do we give enough exposure or a fair exposure to new restaurants, or perhaps to smaller restaurants, and so on. And I think this will be one of the key challenges that we will need to solve in the community of recommenders and personalization in the future, right? I've seen great work done here by Spotify, and had really interesting conversations more in the space of like ethics and fairness, right? You can imagine that, at least I believe that, you know, it should be a level playing field, right? If I have a product, I should be able to expose it. And especially at the beginning, it can be really hard. So you need to build mechanisms to enable exposure for certain brands, restaurants, or hotels, or whatever it is you're selling. I've seen this new approach of bandits work really well here. At Booking, we're working on solving some of these challenges, and I've seen it work in Zalando as well. So perhaps that's the direction to go, but you also need to make sure you know why you're doing it, I feel. And for me, that's to create that level playing field.
Yeah, one interesting area, especially on personalization, is the ability to experiment and to constantly improve the algorithms. And this is where typically A/B testing comes into play. And I think it's implemented by several teams that work on personalization. I'm curious, on one hand, how successful like using A/B testing frameworks is in the organizations that you've worked, and what are your biggest learnings from that as well? Maybe Mikio, you take it on.
No, I think in general, so A/B testing is definitely like super important, right? Because so you want to get, I think in general, from you want to get to a point where you have set everything up, and then you can really focus on improving the algorithms, right? So you need to have, as we already talked about, like metrics. You have to like translate what you want from the product into something that you can measure, and then the algorithms can try to find that. But on the other hand, also one thing I think it was very interesting with recommendation is it's really hard to or let's say, so one problem is if you only have A/B tests, right, then you can only iterate very slowly, because you always have to do an A/B test, and then it takes a week or even longer till you have some insights and so on. So you definitely want to have this offline evaluation what you had, but then the problem with recommendation is that you can't just do offline evaluation like one-on-one, because you cannot actually go back in time and show customers something else. So you have to come up with some idea of like estimating whether a customer would have liked what you've shown them, and you can try to do that, right? So I usually call that like a proxy metric, but there's actually something that I think needs to be designed very well for the specific application you have, and then also it has to be like fit to actually how much data you have, how sparse it is, how often do customers come back, and so on. But I think you really want to, so in the end you really want to have like a full pipeline of stuff you can sort of test offline very quickly till you have a good candidate, and then you can bring the candidate to the A/B test, and then over time sort of continue to improve.
On that A/B testing, maybe Humberto, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I guess it's, you know, similar to Mikio, because we both work in Zalando for a while, and more recently in Booking. I was having a conversation with someone from the experimentation team, and I was just really impressed, because the barrier for experimentation of Booking and A/B testing is so low that people are just running, I feel like, way too many A/B tests, right? It's funny. I've never seen this in an org. Like it's really, A/B test driven, right? Which is quite interesting. But going back to the need of offline experimentation is very, very, very important, because otherwise you can't iterate as fast. And for machine learning, it can be quite tricky. When I talk to my team about this in the past, I've always said, okay, we don't need to do an A/B test to prove that we're right. We need to make an A/B test to know if we're going in the right direction. So what is the smallest hypothesis we can test? So we often created A/B tests just to learn something, right? Like to understand position bias better, to then see if it's actually a problem or not, or to see maybe instead of trying to optimize click and purchase, you first optimize for click, see if that works, then you optimize for purchase, and then see how you stitch those together, right? Like I think the more cycles of experimentation, either offline or online, you do, the more successful you'll be in the future, right? And I feel a lot of people just tend to A/B test at the very end when the algorithm is ready, and then realize something went wrong. There's so much you can learn as well from integration, right? But also A/B testing is not enough, right? You also need really good metrics that are instrumented. So alerting and monitoring systems, not only for 404s or something is down, but also, what is my CTR at any given point of time? I think those things are super, super important. And those three tools you need in different stages of your product. And I think the last one, so that monitoring and alerting, has helped teams that I work with in the past to detect problems really early and avoid them, being really big problems for the customer.
We also always do A/B tests, even when we have some minor change in the algorithm, then we always try to do A/B test. But we also notice, okay, you need at least 2 weeks to run the A/B test, and after a while, sometimes things get messy by the local teams, and okay, my results are not valid now because we show one extra swim lane in the variant or something like this. And I agree. For now, our setup is that we use the offline evaluator mostly for comparing the methods and see, okay, it's a nice difference that we have. It's worth moving this algorithm to online A/B testing, and we always perform A/B tests to be sure that we have improvements on the business metrics that we have set up. We also evaluate the business metrics every few months or so. Okay, are we looking into the correct things? Is this valuable for the team? Is this the team that the recommendations what are bringing to the business and so on? And what we also really like and what we are working on is that we have this a multi-arm bandit setup, where you are able to deploy different versions of your algorithms on, I don't know, recommendations or ranking or whatever you like, where the algorithms itself, they do this reinforcement learning and they feed the feedback directly back to the split of the customers, and ideally after a while, right, you have the best working, the best algorithm deployed to most of the users, but also you leave the chance that somehow the taste of or the behavior of the customers or the users changes, and then other method is winning, so you don't have to do anything. So automatically, a bigger proportion of your customers are looking into these results. So yeah.
Maybe just one note I want to add is because we always say 1 or 2 weeks. I've had A/B tests that run for 6 months. It can be super slow as well. Depends on where or what you're doing, and the less traffic you have, checkout page or something like that, it's gonna take longer. 6 months is a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you even forgot you had the A/B test run. It's oh great, it didn't work out. We missed something, so it's tricky.
Yeah, exactly.
So you realize after 5 months you broke it or something, right?
Yeah. Well, so many things can happen in between, right? And that's a problem for A/B tests. So I think, Aleksandra, the approach of this bandit system is getting a lot of popularity because, it allows to adapt a lot, and that's really nice for these sort of systems that learn, right? It's a very elegant solution, I feel, for a lot of these problems.
If you were to just sit back and think, especially about recommendations and personalization, what would you see as the biggest challenges there in actually recommending the best items to customers? what do you see there as the biggest challenges? Maybe Aleksandra, do you have any insights? What you would see as a challenge there?
Yeah, as I said, like food delivery, I would say like food marketplace is completely different to for example, I don't know, fashion industry or booking, for example, because we see that customers tend to order what they like, what they have their favorite restaurant, they have their favorite dish, so it's difficult to offer them something to try new, because you can quickly have a bad experience if, I don't know, you recommend the dish and the customer didn't like it, so he might not order again. And the other difficulty is when you try to personalize, and I mentioned also again this, you find you match the taste of the customer, and you know which are the restaurants that you need to recommend him, or what features these restaurants can have, but for a given time and a location when the customer wants to order, these restaurants are not available. So then you have to go with some restaurants which are not maybe the best matches for this customer, for the user. And this is the challenge for personalization at the food marketplace, I would say.
Mikio, in all the different industries where you have experience, what problems did you see there? What challenges did you see there?
No, I think I think that in general, right? So the interesting thing about recommendation is it's sort of, again, so on the one hand you have these machine learning algorithms, but then actually when you look at the different application areas, it just is so different, right? So one thing is more like at Netflix or at Spotify, you're sort of recommending the same things, right? And you're just sort of, okay, what is the next similar thing I would see or something? But then when you come to fashion, it's often like, so things have to go together, right? So what Humberto said earlier. So if you buy this shirt, what would be the right pants for that or so? And then you suddenly have completely different structure in there. And then I think with hotels or at Get Your Guide, when you're, right, so you don't want to recommend something similar, but maybe, so if you already go there, then what would be the next attraction you want to visit, which is close by, which is nice, complimentary, and so on. And then I think the other big, so that's like one big challenge, I think. And then the other is sort of, if people are on your website, then actually figuring out where they are in their journey, right? So are they still sort of browsing? Are they narrowing down? Right? Do they want inspiration, or do they really want to find something? They have something in mind, they just haven't seen it yet. And ideally, you would like to have an algorithm that sort of can infer all of that from the behavior and then change also what it recommends. And I think that's hard, right? So it's not that easy. So you can sort of try to put like as much information, present as much information as you can to the algorithm, and then hope that somehow the algorithm is able to pick out these modes, or not. And I think so I would say that those are the two biggest challenges in this whole area.
Humberto, maybe from your side?
Very interesting thoughts. Maybe I add some different flavor. I think what I feel the most excited about is the fact that a lot of the research that I read and all of what people are currently doing in like in all the platforms that we talk about is a lot about short term. How do I learn something within a session, the last 20 clicks or whatever? But learning long term tastes or needs are quite difficult. Like if you can, the metaphor is, can an algorithm understand who I am as a person and infer my needs, right, based on that for either my holidays or so on. And those change within time, so that's quite difficult. I think we're there, and I think there will be a lot of work in the future related to like the ethicals concerns that all of the industry have, regardless of where you work on, and how do you make sure you have a fair, an accurate and fair recommendation at the same time. So I think those are the things that I'm maybe not the most important, but I'm the most excited about to see in the future, right? That we need to solve collectively, but also maybe moving the discussion a bit away from, like we're doing today, I think a great job at that. Moving the discussion away from algorithms to assistants, right? And like whole products. That's very important. Like people often think I have an algorithm. Can I put it here? It's like, well, it's not really going to work that way. You know, there's a lot that you need to do around it. So yeah, we all have a lot of work, which is good.
So there was just a couple of follow-up questions from the audience here. So I'm just gonna take one here, and thanks a lot for Gloria for asking. And the question here is, what determines how long an A/B test should run? Do you have an ideal, sort of cap at what time or what level you stop the A/B test? It's a question basically to you all. I don't know who was interested to take that up.
I mean, so it depends a bit like which school of statistic you belong to, right? But in the end, sort of it comes down to how much traffic you have and how sure you want to be of your result. And then, so if you take like a more frequentist approach, right? So you have to ask yourself, okay, what is how much uplift I'm actually looking for? And then you can sort of see when do I have enough data to be sure whether I have this uplift or not. So essentially that's in general what it boils down to. If you have if you're in different countries and in one of the countries you have a lot of traffic, it takes much shorter than in another country. And if the difference you want to see is smaller, then it also takes longer.
Maybe Humberto and Aleksandra, what's been your take on how long to run and maybe when to stop?
Yeah, I would say the traffic, it defines if you have a lot of traffic, you cover your sample size and the statistical significance of the test, and this also defines the time that you will run the test. Because sometimes if you go for the uplift, you can see some uplift, I don't know, in the first 3-5 days maybe. But if you wait a little bit, you can see that this, I don't know, goes down or it's the same as your control. So yeah, that is our experience.
I would say get yourself a platform or a product that has a sample size calculator and calculates a lot of this stuff for you, right? Because, if you can automate that process, you don't have to repeat it all over again. At Booking, we have such calculator. You put, how much traffic you have per day, how much uplift you want to see, and how sure you want to be, and then it tells you it should be 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. There's also in some platforms seasonality effects, so perhaps full week cycles are considered to be important to keep, but maybe that's not important for some other products.
Bogdan had a question here, and it's the most unexpected way which the year as it has developed, how it affected recommendations in your respective platforms. I'm assuming here 2020 has been a very interesting year in terms of COVID. I don't know if there are any learnings already from this, unexpected or otherwise interesting.
Some of that. And hi, Boden, nice to see you. As you all know, 2020 affected travel industry a lot, right? So especially the behavior. And what was very interesting for me is that people still wanted to travel, right? Like people have that inherent need, they need to get away and go somewhere else. But because of the restrictions, they couldn't go where they possibly wanted. So what changed a lot is where people could travel. And you all of a sudden you saw that your traditional methods for retraining models based on previous data didn't perform quite as you expected. So here you need to get smarter, and how do you make sure your models are adaptive to this new behavior and so on. And as you all know, the whole travel industry moved from a global travel world to a more localized travel world, right, where a lot of people were traveling within their country or maybe within Europe, but not so many people were traveling across continents. And how do you make sure your recommendations are effective and those big shifts? Literally you had borders closing like every day, so like your data from last week might not be telling you a lot of where people are going to go next week. So that was very interesting.
Have you seen any interesting changes there, Mikio, on that recommendations this year?
Yeah, I think the one big thing is, of course, like for many, actually it became during some time very hard. So when you have no traffic, right, or very little traffic or much less traffic than before, then you can't just continue to learn. And then of course also because the data changed so much, you really have to rethink how you work with the data, right? So maybe go back to more manual interaction or very simple models that can even learn with very few data. Yeah, I think that was pretty challenging.
And Aleksandra?
Yeah, I mean, for Delivery Hero, this increased on the better way. I mean, the business grew a lot. We got a lot of more orders. I have to say, people delivering at home. Also expanded the business to the grocery and shops delivery. So yeah, we had to deliver a lot of new recommendation strategies to these different businesses. So it was, for Delivery Hero at least, this year was sort of good, I would say, although it was a very weird year for all of us.
Apuv has a very interesting question around customization, and it's going to be interesting. So it's about, app screens can be different for different customers, whether users get classified into different profiles. So I'm assuming here we're talking about segmentation and using different segmentation information to show customers different screens, different maybe UI elements. The question here is how much time data is needed actually to create something like that. Maybe, I don't know if any of the panel has experience with such heavy UI customization based on different customer segments. I see Humberto nodding, so
Okay. I don't know if I was nodding, but yeah,
Okay.
I looked at this problem in the past, right? And so I think there's two steps, right? Segmentation can be useful, and perhaps you don't need as much data. But once you have enough data to personalize, you should be able to personalize for every customer, right? And not put them into boxes, because everyone might be slightly different. So I think that approach I've seen work really well. And then there are things that, because you don't know so much about the customer, you cannot tell them. For example, one of the teams that I work with at Booking, we were doing recommendations for what we call the connected trip. So how do we enable people, once they book a hotel, book a taxi to get there and so on. So obviously, if you haven't booked a hotel, we're not going to tell you how to get to that hotel by taxi. So we shouldn't be showing that piece of content, right? And that's an example of how the UI can be customized based on your previous transactions or the current state. And that is just to help you, right, achieve your goals, which is enjoy your holiday with the least amount of friction possible, right? So I think that's one of the examples. But I've seen it work really well at individual level, not so much at like millennials versus Gen Z or something like that. I guess it depends on the approach your company takes.
Have you had such setup, Mikio, where you use segmentation data to?
Yeah, I think segmentation.
I assume here you have different customers or different profiles of customers. I'm assuming Apuv correct. So correct me if I'm wrong, Apuv, because you're here. So feel free.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's something that people often have, but let's say more from a marketing perspective or so, right? So I think I think one question is often, so why have the segmentations been created, for which purpose originally, right? And is this really a good segmentation that later on makes sense for something like recommendation? So I think I would take a more data-driven approach where you have a model that can potentially pick up or like, I don't know, with some latent variable kind of thing, right? So where you implicitly sort of segment people into different things so that but I think in the end it's more like a data pooling kind of approach. So you try to make more better use of the data. There's one aspect here, especially when it comes to UIs and stuff, which I think is, so that's already pretty advanced topic, right? But so so what can happen is actually that you create a system like where many sort of different machine learning systems are trying to optimize for different things. So let's say you have a home screen, and then on the home screen you select between different like kind of swim lanes, and then there's another algorithm which is like in the swim lane tries to predict the best thing. And I think if you're not careful here, you can get into something where sort of each algorithm does something, but then another algorithm messes with the output, and it gets really hard to reattribute or even still learn from the data, right? So it could be that you made the right decision, but then another algorithm tried to do something, and that's I think often something that people who are not that familiar with machine learning, they're not that aware of, right? So if you look at it from a purely engineering perspective, it's quite common that you have quite complex layers of stuff that assemble something and then you show it to the customer. But if once you start adding machine learning to it, right, you really have to think about, okay, can I still measure like what is the output of what I do, or might be some effects where one system is sort of adversely affecting another system and so on. And then, of course, the solution, of course, would be to try to do something which is as simple as possible.
Maybe Aleksandra also?
Yeah, I mean, currently at Delivery Hero, we do not personalize the home screen. Unless you are a guest user, you would not see the recommended for you, like the personalized swim lanes. But if you have at least one order, you will be able to see your personalized swim lanes. But we do have sort of customer segments where we distinguish between the customer engagement, how often it is, what is their like ordering habits and so on. And as far as I know, we have plans to leverage this information in future and sort of to try to drive the engagement of the lower engagement customers by, I don't know, offering them some free deliveries or discounts, or for those who order often, that we like perfectionalize the knowledge for them, and then we say, okay, we know you like this and you should order this again, or if he goes to a new location, okay, this restaurant matches your taste with your past orders and so on. So we give the best recommendations for the different customer segments. And yes, as I can agree that personalizing the home screen it's a challenge. Yeah, it's not an easy task.
There was a question from Ariel about team setup. This is basically how the teams are structured, as in product engineers, data scientists, machine learning engineers. What's been your experience? Successful teams that you've worked in, how were they set up? Maybe Aleksandra, could you?
Yeah, you need everything, everything mentioned there. Yeah, usually the requests comes from the product team, like, okay, our brand wants to do this, we want this type of recommendations, these are the requirements and so on. And then right, the data scientists will sort of analyze the data, come up with a model or several variations of a model and so on, but we will be offline evaluated. This is then implemented by the engineers and the ML ops, and served also by the team, usually via APIs. So yeah, it depends, I think, on even in Delivery Hero there is sometimes different organization. Either all these roles are within the same team, or there are supporting teams like MLOps or teams infra team that supports multiple teams and also will support this particular team for the task. So whatever works.
All right, Alex, thanks a lot for that. I just see we are almost out of time here, but I would like nonetheless to use the time to thank our great panel here, Mikio, Humberto, and Aleksandra, for the great insights on personalization, your personal experiences in different industries and organizations you're working with. So thanks a lot for that. And also for the audience, for your participation and your great questions that hopefully were fully answered. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to the panelists afterwards. And last but not least, to thank Lord Carla and Chloe for the great support in organizing this panel. So thanks a lot, and goodbye.
Thanks so much for having us. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.